آزادی بیان.
言论自由
Free speech.
Let me take it quite different. I know you've read the Mark Thompson interview on the website.
Right.
Now, this is the Director General of the BBC, and it's a fascinating interview. The Director General of the BBC, Mark Thompson, is a devout Catholic. He allowed the broadcasting of Jerry Springer the opera, which has a very offensive representation of Jesus Christ. And I said to him, surely the BBC would not have broadcast something comparably satirical about the Prophet Muhammad. To which, after a moment's hesitation, he said, yes, I think that's right. And then he gave 3 reasons, basically. Number one was one I pushed him on, which is, it's the threat of violence. I mean, he rather wonderfully said, let me see if I can find the exact words, because it was rather nicely put. Let me see if I can see it here. Yes, he said, it's the threat of violence, he says, obviously from Muslims. Well, clearly it's a very notable move in the game. I mean without question. And then says Mark, I complain in the strongest possible terms is different from I complain in the strongest possible terms and I'm loading my AK-47 as I write. So that's reason number one, the threat of violence. But then he gives 2 other reasons. I'd like you to comment on them both. One is, he says, look, Christianity in Britain is the established church. It has broad shoulders. Muslims are a vulnerable minority. You cannot editorially, as a national public service broadcaster, apply exactly the same standard to the secure majority and the vulnerable minority. So argument number 1 is vulnerable minority. Okay. Yeah, we've talked about violence.
Yep.
Argument number 2, this is very interesting. Mark Thompson, Director General of the BBC, as a devout Christian, says, listen, as a realist in religion, someone who believes in the reality of their religious belief, you've got to understand the impact of something like the cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad. Yeah, the impact of blasphemy. He said it has the emotional force of a piece of grotesque child pornography. And that secular liberals, like most of the people who work at the BBC, that's me speaking, not Mark, don't get that sense of profound hurt that truly religious people have. So I wonder if you could comment on both Mark Thompson's points. That's vulnerable minorities and then the sense of real hurt.
Mm-hmm. Can I take them in reverse order?
Sure.
The sense of hurt. Every Muslim will tell you, both behind closed doors and outside of those doors, that as Muslims we are to worship God, not God's self-appointed ambassadors. Every Muslim will acknowledge, when pushed, Prophet Muhammad is not God. Many Christians believe Jesus Christ is God. And yet, in offensive depictions of Christ, you will still not get the kind of hostility, and in some cases violence, that Muslims will express over somebody who is manifestly, within mainstream Islam, not God. So the sense of hurt is something that I don't think can honestly be traced back to who is being caricatured or depicted. I think that it is a ploy, this sense of hurt. And moreover, I will say this, that then brings me to the earlier point about vulnerable minorities. I think it is too easy, and I listened to Mark Thompson's interview more than once 3 times actually, and couldn't shake the feeling that he was assuming that being offended is the same thing as being discriminated against. And it's not. One can be offended by having to abide by the same standards as everybody else. For example, I tell the story in A La Liberty and Love, and let me just read from it very briefly. At the World Economic Forum in January 2006, just before the Danish cartoon crisis, I attended a session about the US religious right. A cartoonist satirized one of America's most influential Christian ministers, Pat Robertson. In the audience, chuckling with the rest of us, was the head of the Muslim Council of Britain, Iqbal Sakrani. But his smirk folded into a pout at the first glimpse of a cartoon that ridiculed Muslim clerics. The point being this: equal treatment, offending everybody, may cause offense, but it need not signify oppression, let alone Islamophobia. And this brings me then back to the issue of the ploy. Not always, but again, in my own experience, I can attest that what many Muslims will say as discussions, really in order to, as a part of these discussions, in order to curtail the discussion as soon as possible, they will say, I feel hurt. I feel victimized. I'm being violated. And I think there's a very simple principle that we all need to remember. Very simple. That disagreeing with one another's ideas does not mean denying each other's humanity.